Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're making butter chicken. So we start off with the chicken. I'm using chicken breasts. You can also use chicken thighs, but I like to make my butter chicken with boneless meat. So even if it's chicken thighs, maybe you can ask the butcher, especially at Food Lovers Market, for them to remove the bones for you. They always do that for me. So just cut that into cubes. I like slightly smaller cubes for mine. And I'm gonna do the spice mix for the marinade. Very important for butter chicken to do this step. I always do it the night before. So I start off with garam masala. I am going to use 3 teaspoons of garam masala. You can also use that mother-in-law spice instead if you don't have this. But you want quite a fragrant Indian spice for this purpose. So I'm using 2 teaspoons of that because, as you can see, I have quite a little bit of meat there. I'm also using a whole tablespoon of crushed garlic. Then turmeric. This is very important. I mean, this is gonna lead to that lovely yellow color that you see with most butter chicken. So I am using a teaspoon of the turmeric on here. That is followed by some cumin. That's also going to be just a teaspoon of cumin. Then I'm using some smoked Spanish paprika. I love the smoky flavor that comes from this paprika. Also using a teaspoon of that. It just adds to everything. This part is not really, I would say, mandatory, but it's really important. And that is followed up by some ginger. So the recipe is nicer when you have fresh ginger. So if you have fresh ginger, you should use like a teaspoon of grated fresh ginger, but I used a teaspoon of ground ginger because I didn't have the fresh. So if you have fresh, it's much better. And then you just season. Look, I didn't measure, but probably about half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. You'll see that I'm gonna season every stage. I'm also using plain yogurt. Doesn't matter which one, honestly. But the plain yogurt is literally the main factor of the marinade. So I use about 3 tablespoons, like heaped tablespoons of the plain yogurt here. That's what binds everything together, but also the acid from that is what's going to break down our chicken. You'll see that you never come across really hard chicken when eating butter chicken. It's because of this yogurt, the way it breaks down the fibers of the chicken. Even though I'm using breast, it'll come out so lovely and tender and just beautiful inside, never dry. So I'm just gonna mix this thoroughly before adding my chicken to it. So I'm just gonna make sure that all of the chicken pieces are nicely coated. Like I said, I do this overnight most of the time, but I think you can get away with giving it maybe 3 hours. If you weren't able to do it the night before, it should still work out pretty well. So this is the first step you do, and then you just set it aside in the fridge for when you actually do the cooking. So I'm doing mine overnight. The next steps that follow would have, are happening the next day basically. So I'm just gonna close that up and set it aside. Remember to subscribe to my channel, guys, if you haven't. Next steps, I'm using 3 small bell peppers and half an onion. I chop them roughly before putting them inside my blender. So this is like a sauce I like making. It's like the onions, it's like a tomato sauce of sorts. Okay, so we are gonna put a a tablespoon of crushed garlic in here. Sorry, I didn't see that the angle of my camera was quite horrible here. So it's not showing what I want. Okay, so a whole can of tomatoes goes in there. I actually noticed much later that instead of buying crushed tomatoes, I bought the tomatoes with onions. It doesn't hurt, but actually, you should just buy a can of tomatoes or use two medium-sized tomatoes, not the one mixed with onions, because already we have onions in this. But you improvise. There's no way I was gonna stop cooking now because I had a can of tomatoes and onions. It's not gonna hurt anybody. So I have that going in my blender. I follow that up with some ginger. That is a teaspoon of ginger. In this step as well, if you have ginger, fresh ginger, you should go ahead and use that instead. I then followed up with a hot Nando's sauce, and the reason I did that is because the recipe does call for fresh chilies. However, I didn't have any, so if you do have fresh chilies, you should use about 4, because I like mine quite hot. So I did the 3 tablespoons of the Nando sauce, and I followed up with some chili flakes as well for good measure. So I always add about like half a cup of water. So this helps you blend this easier. If you don't add the water here, you'll see it'll be so gluggy and hard for your blender to actually work on it. So the water actually helps. So that's what I do before starting the blending process. You'll see it blends quite easily, and what the reason for that is I always dice my vegetables, chunky, to put them in there. You never just put like huge chunks of things in the blender, because then it will eventually be done. However, it will take much longer. As you can see, that was a literal whiz. It is basically done now. So I just let it go for a bit longer because I do like my sauce for the butter chicken to be quite smooth. So we move on to the next step. We have half an onion again. So this is half a big onion. So if you have medium-sized onions, you should use the whole thing ready. So I've chopped it regular size, and I introduced that to some oil. So you'll see there's quite a bit of oil there. I'm using canola oil. I do like my curries to to have a bit more oil than other dishes, I guess. It just helps with this process especially. You see the onions are fully covered with the oil, and they become nice and translucent without burning as well, because they are immersed in quite a bit of the oil. So here they are, nice and translucent, ready for the next step. Now I use tomato paste. You can also use tomato puree for the step. I will use 3 tablespoons of the tomato paste here. Just squeezing it out and introducing it to the onions. As you can see, my onions are not burnt at all, like I said. The problem with burnt onions is that there's no way of avoiding that taste, that bitter taste or even flavor in your dishes. So you want to be careful around something like that. So I'm just going to mix this thoroughly. This is not on high heat, and that's because I'm not trying to burn this either. You want to cook down the paste before introducing the next step, and that is because there is that very tin, flavor in pastes and purees. If you don't cook them down well enough, it does end up affecting the taste of your dishes. So now I introduced I introduce my tomato slash pepper like puree. So that's the one we made just now. So this goes in here and still on medium heat. So this is gonna cook down. You do not want to rush this process. Just a reminder that we added water to this earlier. So you want to cook it down for about 30 to 45 minutes. And that's because you want it to reduce down, and then it gets this really nicely concentrated flavor of the peppers and the tomatoes. If you rush it, then first of all, the flavor doesn't get nice and concentrated because you still have quite a bit of liquid in there. So I just have it going there for quite a while, and I leave it until I feel it's thick enough, and then I set it aside. You'll see I made quite a lot of this. I'm not going to use all of this in my dish for today. I'm going to use about nearly a half of what I made now. Is only half of what I made now is gonna go into this butter chicken. I always make a lot of the sauce because I find it so useful for a lot of other dishes, so I keep it in the fridge. So I've just introduced some aromat. You can use just salt here, and then some mixed herbs. So I'm just gonna put the mixed herbs in there as well. That is nearly a tablespoon of that. So as mentioned earlier, I find it easier and better for the outcome of the dish to season throughout. So you saw I seasoned the chicken on its own. Now I'm seasoning the sauce. That is some mother-in-law spice going in there, a tablespoon of it, and some Spanish paprika. I'm only using half a tablespoon, so that's about a teaspoon of that in there. As you can see, my sauce is much thicker than it was earlier, and it is so nice and fragrant because all of those raw ingredients are now really cooked. And I am happy with that consistency going forward. As mentioned, please do not use all of this in this recipe unless you have quite a lot more of the chicken than I do, because it's going to be quite overpowering. This is quite like I said, concentrated sauce. On to the next steps. I'm just going to use about 2 tablespoons of oil. I use canola oil for the step, and we are on a high heat. This is very important. This is a high heat, and I am using a non-stick pan. I find it works better because then you don't lose any chicken from being stuck to the bottom of the pan. So this is the chicken that has been marinating overnight, and we are now cooking it. So it's very important for this chicken to be on high heat because you want to basically sear it on both sides without overcooking it yet, because it's going to be reintroduced to the sauce later, and adding the small pieces of chicken to sauce later will result in it cooking further. So you don't want to overcook your chicken. So doing it fast and high is the aim of this process. As you can see, I lay it nice and flat on the pan so that every single bit of chicken has contact with the heat, and try not to manipulate it at all, basically. So I had it going for about 3 to 4 minutes on each side before turning it, and that makes sure that there's a nice crust on the underside of the chicken. The way it's made traditionally is on basically charred. So they char it quite a bit when they make it, and that, actually influences the flavor at the end because it has that bit of smokiness. if you've had like a really nice traditional Indian butter chicken. So I'm trying to emulate that by charring it, even though I'm using a pan. I'm not moving it around too much because I want to get some real color on the underside of the chicken. So if it looks a little black on yours or whatever, honestly, don't even worry about it. It's actually going to make your end product taste even better for this recipe. So I'm doing this in real time because I wanted you to see that it does take quite a bit of time, and I'm not necessarily happy with the way it is right now, so I'll wait a bit longer. Butter chicken is literally my favorite. Honestly, it's like the best comfort food of your life, and I just think it packs so much flavor, but it could be as mild as possible. But the flavor that's in here from all the masalas is really incredible. And I just love the color that it's starting to get from the turmeric that we added earlier. Yeah, so now I'm just gonna, let the other side also get a bit of a chance to get seared. As you can see, there's quite a bit of color on the bottom side of my chicken. I am happy with that. I could have taken it a bit further, but this will work because, as mentioned, the longer it stays on the heat, the more cooked it becomes, and that's also not what we're trying to get here. So it's about balancing the color that you're getting on the outside with the cooking time as well. So the tomato paste we made earlier is literally the best thing I ever found out in life because it makes anything so easy. It can be used as a base for pastas that you want to have a bit of a tomato flavor to them. So that's why I was saying I make quite a bit of it most of the time when I make it, because nobody likes washing blenders. So if you're going to use the blender, you better use it to the full capacity. So I make quite a lot of it and I keep it. And then if I'm making like a pasta sauce, I can have that as a base and then put a bit of cream in there and you're gone. So you literally don't even need to start from making onions, because remember that sauce already has onions and everything. Then you have a bit of cream. It's quite a nice little nifty thing to do and keep in your fridge for weekday meals especially. So I'm happy with my chicken. I am going to set it aside, and using the same pan with a knob of butter, I think I would say that's about a tablespoon and a half of butter. Just let that melt slightly before going on with the next steps. Now we're gonna add the sauce we made earlier from the peppers and the tomatoes, and we're just gonna cook it, introduce it to basically this dish now. As you know, it's already been cooked, so this is just to revive it really, because we made it earlier, and then go on to the next steps. Do you see how incredibly thick the sauce is at this moment? The flavor from it is incredible. The garlic is coming through, and the mother-in-law spice is literally a favorite of mine. It has all of those nice Indian notes, and it's so well balanced. I just think it's a revelation. If you like Indian food, curries and that sort of thing, if you have it in there, it's like such a nice cheat without having to get the flavors. It's such a nice cheat for getting all the nice flavors for Indian food in one place, and it's nice and mild as well, so I always use that. So now we are going to use cream. I'm using half a cup of cream, fresh cream, and this is one of the steps that obviously lend themselves to the decadence of this curry dish. This and the butter are very important for this dish. Well, butter obviously because it's butter chicken, but this is the difference between other normal curries to this curry. It's quite decadent, it's quite luxurious and rich, and that is something that you accomplish because of the addition of the two ingredients that make that that way. So here goes our cream, and we just mix it quickly with the sauce. This is literally the last little steps to our dish. It looks really good, but I noticed that it's still, I don't know, it's not quite as smooth as I would like it. So I've mentioned this earlier, but I love it when the sauce of my butter chicken is nice and smooth. And so I will be using the blender again here, which seems a bit crazy because I already blended the prep for the initial sauce was blended, but I think I'll blend this some more. So had I been using a saucepan for this part, I would have just used my stick blender. Then I wouldn't have had to pour this into the blender. But because I'm using a pan, it's too wide, and the stick blender won't be able to do its job properly to smooth my sauce. So I am using the blender again. So just pouring all of the contents of my pan into that blender, and then I'm just gonna have it go and make my sauce a bit more creamier and smoother than it is currently. You can forego the step because, as you know, it will not really add any more flavor or whatever to the dish. However, if you want, I don't know, perfection at the end, brave the step, go ahead, blend it. If you have a stick blender, obviously it's even better. And then I would say just cook this part of the sauce in saucepan, small saucepan, not a wide pan like I used, because then you could have just done it in the pot, just blended it using the stick blender, which would have been awesome. So I'm using about half a cup of water just to clear out the sauce from my blender. I mean, I don't want to waste that lovely sauce that we've worked so hard for. So see, like, that's a lot of good sauce there. So I'm just gonna add it on there. I don't really mind that I added some water there because my sauce, as you could see, was a little thick anyway. I would have needed to loosen that up a bit. Now I've just done that by cleaning my blender slightly. So I'm pretty happy with the texture now, and I am beyond happy with the flavor of the sauce. So now is the time to kind of taste and do the final seasoning of this. But I think I'll actually do that after adding the chicken, because remember the chicken also has some salt in there. So I don't want to season now and then maybe the chicken is already over seasoned. So our chicken goes in, and it's just literally, we don't need to cook it much further, but I'm just gonna now obviously add the final touches that will make sure that the sauce is everything. So after having tasted, I do need a bit more salt, so I'm adding that there. Remember, when it comes to salt and seasoning of your dishes, don't just follow what I've done, because maybe I had under seasoned earlier and so I needed to season now. And in your case, you might not even need to. So please just taste, and that will determine what you're doing with regards to seasoning here. So I like to add green peas, frozen green peas to this. I guess frozen or fresh, but I didn't have any, so I'm using this little corn and beans whatnot mix. I just like to have some vegetables in there, so I'm gonna use that for today. If you have peas, or if you're still gonna buy the ingredients, do get peas. They are a revelation to this dish, and it just looks amazing. The green, the pop of the green on this yellow is just everything. So do use peas rather if you can. I would say you use about half a cup of the vegetables. That is brown sugar I'm adding. You can use any kind of sugar you have, a teaspoon of that. This is so important to the butter chicken, guys. You have no idea. You're not gonna taste the sugar, but the sugar makes this taste so well-rounded. And if you don't have it in there, you'll be like, something's missing, but you don't know what it is. Just trust me on this one. Add the sugar, very important. And then, as with most curries, at the end, I'm just tearing some fresh coriander leaves into that. So this is always at the end, because this is such a tiny herb. It wilts immediately, but it does add this lovely freshness to the dish at the end. And this is basically it, guys. If you liked this recipe, please give my video a thumbs up. I like to see it. If you have any comments or even questions, you can post them down below and I will certainly answer. I served mine with some roti that I made. Also, I do post some other recipes on my Instagram, so do follow. At Kholiwe_cooks. Do follow. Until next time.